Welcome to The Hats. The Hats is a weekly podcast hosted by licensed marriage and family therapist and author Melissa Dumaz and attorney and business owner Kerri Harper-Howie. Listen in for practical tips on how to keep your hats upright, how to handle life when one of your hats gets lopsided, and plenty of real-life solutions to help you balance the many hats you wear daily.
Hello and welcome to the Hats Podcast. This is your co-host, Kerri Harper-Howie, and I'm here with my co-host.
Hi, Hatters. This is Melissa Dumaz. Thanks for being here with us today.
Hatters, we are still in the midst of our Boss Bitch, Boss Babes season. And we realize that sometimes when you use the word boss, there are certain assumptions about what a boss is, how a boss feels, and sometimes bosses don't feel like doing anything. Just because you're a boss doesn't mean that you're constantly feeling like you're in drive mode, that you're constantly motivated. There are going to be times when you just feel like laying in your bed and doing absolutely nothing. And yet, that's the day when your biggest presentation is going to happen, when you have the opportunity to create or get that biggest deal that you've been working on, waiting on. But for some reason, you wake up that morning or you get through lunch and you just don't feel like doing it. Well, we're here today to talk about those days when you just got to show up. We're talking about the show up anyway hat. And Mel, this came to our list of topics to discuss from you. So I want to pass it over to you and say, what does it mean to you and why is it important that we talk about showing up anyway?
Ooh, good question. And as you were talking and as we were preparing for the episode today, I was thinking, I know I recommended this episode, but I don't know specifically what was happening in our lives. I think we were on a text thread going back and forth about like how busy we were, how full our plate was, and how there were things that we didn't really want to do, but we had to. And I was like, ooh, we should do the show up anyway hat.
Yep.
But I don't remember the specific details of that. So what does that mean for me? That means that sometimes there's just ish that has to be done, and it has to be done, and I have to show up and do it anyway. And sometimes there's ish within my business, within my home, within my personal life that I've committed to. And I think you and I have talked about in a previous episode, the commitment hat, that once we commit to something that we're in, and so once I've committed and I've given someone my yes, or I've scheduled the appointment, that means I got to show up. And in those moments of like getting in the shower, getting dressed, I may not be feeling the energy, but I make sure the energy is there before I press play, or before I open the door and say hello, or before I hop on that Zoom call, or whatever the activity is. The energy may not be there leading up to it, but if I've decided to show up anyway, then I'm going to come with it.
I think the same for me. You know, I am a rule follower, a commitment follow through with her. I have a really hard time knowing that I've committed to something, and usually when you've committed, it's because you want to do it, but it doesn't always happen right away. So in that intervening time, something may come up, some person, some feeling that makes you not feel like doing it. And so for me, it's the same thing. Showing up anyway means acknowledging that I don't want to do the thing. And even sometimes it may be I feel like I can't do the thing, but you still make the decision to do the thing. And I'm broad here because Melissa mentioned it. It might be in your personal life. It might be in your professional life. It might be in your workout life. It might be in your group life. There are many different contexts in which not wanting to show up shows up. And still, whatever the context may be, you have to just go ahead and do it. So maybe, Mel, you can kind of give us a more tangible example. What's a moment where you felt like, I just don't feel like showing up, and yet you did anyway?
I have those conversations many a mornings when it comes to the gym. I'm like, I'm tired. I don't want to go. And then I remember, but girl, you're going to be mad later when the day goes on and you did not get that workout in. You're going to be mad when you don't reap the benefits of those endorphins, that dopamine, that serotonin that you get from working out, which really is like the start of my day. So those conversations take place. And there's this quote that says, the only workout you regret is the one that didn't happen. And so that comes to mind. Another place where sometimes I don't want to show up could be a commitment I made during my moment of feeling, what's the word I'm looking for? Feeling excited about being outside. And then when that day and time comes, you're like, dang, the introvert in me is taking over. Why did I make this commitment? Oh, the extrovert version of you was like, yeah, let's do it. Let's do lunch. Let's do brunch. Let's go to this networking event. And then when the day comes, the introvert is like, I don't really want to do that. What does that mean? So those are definitely moments. And then I would also say, whenever I commit to something on my calendar during a time that I know it's going to be like a hustle or a rush for me, then I'm like, why did I commit to that? And I have this energy of like, I don't want to show up. And then I have to remind myself, like, girl, you got to stop committing to times that, because I don't feel like I commit to things that I don't necessarily want to do. Because clearly, if I commit to it, if I gave it a yes, then I want to, but I will have moments. But usually it's the time that I'm like, why did I commit to that time? And so those are moments where I'm like, ugh, and not necessarily regretting it, but definitely having a conversation with myself like, okay, this is an opportunity where you have to be reminded to be more mindful about your time, to be more mindful about your boundaries in your time, and to remember this moment that like, you don't like a 9 a.m. therapy client. So do not commit to that. Do not. Like, why would you do that to yourself?
Because you were like, I can help this person.
Right.
I can help. I can get the breakthrough. I totally get that. You're right. It's those moments that you sign up to do something and you're not thinking it all the way through. So, I will say I have two recent examples of this. One, I agreed to be a committee chair in one of the organizations that I'm in. And one of the primary responsibilities for in this chair position is to plan a big event that will happen later this year. And so I showed up, I was into it, and then something changed in the course of planning this event that made me feel very disappointed and frustrated and as if I was being undermined. And so for me, I was like, I'm not showing up. I told the person that I agreed for these reasons, I'm not showing up for this. But I allowed myself to listen to the reasons why I was needed in this role, why it would be appreciated if I stayed in this role. And I really had to give it some thought. And I gave it a lot of thought. And I got through all my feelings of frustrations and anger, and I decided to show up for this organization anyway. And so now I'm back on the road to planning this event. But it took me it was hard. It was hard for me to decide to show up because at the end of the day, I think I'm able to see I'm not just showing up for myself, but I'm showing up for my entire chapter. I'm showing up for the history of our chapter and all the people who have come before me and laid the foundation for me to even be in this position. But it was difficult. It was difficult. And in this moment, it was something external that made me not want to show up, which sometimes makes it easier to be like, I'm not showing up.
Right.
I'm just not going to do it.
Right.
But, I at least I'll give myself credit for at least listening and being open to why I should still show up. And then one other just small example, kind of to your point of the time, just this past Sunday, I was planning a big event that fortunately went very well, but I also had committed to my son's being in a piano recital like 2 hours after that. And then for my youngest son to go to a soccer game like 4 hours after that event. And I was like, oh my God, what was I thinking?
What were you thinking?
What was I thinking? I was like, oh, my son wants to do this. Oh, well, they need to be, and probably I could have planned things differently. But at the end of the day, I was not going to not show up for my children's recital. It was important to them, I think, that I be in the audience. And it was important to me that I have that memory. And it was important to my son to go to that soccer game. So what I did do, though, was I had my husband take him to the soccer game. I was like, babe, we've got to show up for our kid. And that moment became we show up, right?
Right. Teammate, I need some help here.
Teammate, please. I'm calling an audible. So, I can definitely relate to, we have so many things as hatters, as bosses. We're being pulled in many different directions. And so you do kind of have to figure out why is it important? I think that's kind of one of the things that really gets us to what my next question is: how do we differentiate between honoring our own capacity and pushing through when it matters? And to start with at least a partial answer to that question, how important is the thing?
Right. Right.
Because sometimes the importance of the thing to you or to someone really that you love is going to be the thing that can push you through and give you the energy that you talked about. You want to show up with, you want to open that door with a smile. It's really what's the significance of this event. I also sometimes think of what's the frequency
Mm-hmm.
of the event. This recital really only happens once a year, maybe twice a year. So can I push through and show up and give my kids this opportunity to perform, which there's so much value, whether they do great or not, whether they're happy about it or not, there's so much value to that. It's important for a variety of different reasons. Even though I'm exhausted, I'm still going to show up. And in that moment, for me, it's important to show my kids that I'm still going to show up. So that's hopefully a lesson that they're also taking in. I know mom is tired. I know that I'm tired. I don't necessarily feel nobody really feels like doing it. And yet we all show up.
Right.
And so, for me, that's what gets me to push through. Everything is not so important. Everything is not infrequent.
Right.
Everything doesn't, get the same level of importance, I guess I'll say. So for me, that's a part of the way that I differentiate between the two things. What about for you, Mel? How do you differentiate between I've got to push through or I've got to respect my own boundaries?
Yeah, that's a great question because I feel like even as we're talking about the show up anyway hat, there's so many other hats that I don't know if I should say contend with it, but that blend with it. From the commitment hat to the ambitious hat
Mm.
to the responsibility hat, the accountability hat, the communication hat. Like there's so many hats, and the boundaries hat. There's so many hats that are happening at one time. I really love your litmus test, which is like, how frequent is this event? Like, if it's someone's wedding, a baby shower, like milestone events, it's like, okay, yes, I'm going to show up. But I think that's a really good place to start. But at the end of the day, for me, it's about honoring myself and honoring what feels authentic to me. Even to your point when you say, is it important to me or important to our loved ones or to our clients? Even though if I'm evaluating the importance to them, I'm still making room to do what honors me, because it's going to do me and my client a disservice if I show up and I show them, or I have the energy like I don't really feel like being there. Like, who wants to be in a room with a therapist that doesn't really want to be there?
No,
Nobody.
that's the worst therapist.
That's the worst, right?
Right.
And so you honor yourself and your client. In this case, for me, I honor myself and my client by making a choice and saying, does this make sense? Do I really want to be there? And for me, usually it's a yes, because it's a different flow of energy once I show up into my office or once I drive into my office. And I'm very much that therapist where some days when I'm driving into my office, it is gospel music, the Lord pouring into me. Some days it's affirmation music, and some days it's straight up mustard. It's just it depends on the mood. What's
The
the
hype
energy?
song.
Yes, the hype song. What's the energy that I need for that day? The other things that like come up for me is, these statements like, give yourself grace and honor yourself if you're tired, especially for Black women, get your rest. We hear all these like statements and cliches and all these things, which I think are all true. But in order for me to really know, do I need to show up anyway? Do I need to rest? Do I need to sit this one out? Do I need to cancel with understanding? Is honoring me first and doing what feels true and authentic to me.
I love that phrase, cancel with understanding.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is such a beautiful idea because it's one, yes, you give yourself some grace, but you also have to believe that someone will allow you to cancel with
Right.
understanding.
Yes.
And it's hard sometimes to have that faith. And so sometimes you show up anyway and you don't have the right mindset when the person probably would have been very willing to understand why you need to reschedule or cancel, but also that you're open to rescheduling and that it's not personal to them. But I think as you're kind of going through this, explaining, I have reached the limits of my bandwidth, you know? So I love that idea of canceling with understanding. So, Mel, what do you think are some narratives or expectations that make showing up feel harder sometimes? And maybe that I may have kind of just hit on it already.
Yeah.
We assume the other person will not allow us to cancel with understanding. I
Right.
don't know if you want to speak a little bit more to that, or you have other thoughts on what sorts of things make it even harder sometimes.
Yeah, some of them are some of the things that I've shared previously, like making sure you get your rest, honoring your boundaries. I think those make it harder. And then, like you said, feeling like the other person won't understand or that they won't give grace, or even if the narrative is one that is self-inflicted, like if I don't take this opportunity now, I'm not going to get another one. I think that that one is really loud, especially for ambitious women and women, that are showing up as boss babes or boss bitches, that feeling like they're not going to get an opportunity or that they're going to miss something. FOMO is so real. The fear of missing out because I didn't show up or because I decided, you know what, I'm going to honor myself and get some rest versus showing up and not doing my best and then not getting the opportunity anyway. So those are the few things that come up for me. Any others that come up for you, Kerri?
You literally took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say FOMO.
Okay.
And I think that, I guess another way also of putting it is kind of like keeping up with the Joneses. Like, well, if this person or this group, if they're doing it, then I should probably be doing it too. What am I losing out on? Either an experience, an opportunity, a place, what am I going to lose out on if I don't do this thing? When, as you kind of said, when you get to go do that thing, it may very well be you can't even fully experience it because you should not have shown up for whatever reason. And the other thing I'll say is sometimes we just don't listen to our intuition.
Right.
We're not wanting to show up. That's a feeling, and that we sometimes don't honor. And so we talk ourselves out of it, and we kind of just push through sometimes when it's not necessarily in our best interest. So I think, the other thing that I think comes up, and you've talked about this definitely in previous episodes, but is that negative self-talk. You're lazy, you're not doing enough, you're going to betray someone. You're telling yourself that it's really something negative about you, your capacity, your ability, when in fact it's just probably you recognizing that this is a moment when you shouldn't show up. So I think those two things for me, for sure, FOMO and, that negative self-talk of the reason why it's a bad thing for you to not show up
Right.
and not being able to get to the positive side of it.
Right. And I think to add to your piece about the Joneses, the thing that comes up for me is comparison, comparing ourselves. And it could be me comparing myself to Kerri, like, man, she runs a franchise. She's an attorney. She's a mom. Her kids are in all these activities. She travels and she still shows up to the Hats podcast and get it done. Like, girl, get out the bed and roll out, And my husband, in the past year had this conversation with a good friend of ours, who is a pastor, a real estate agent, a community councilman, a father, a husband, and all of these things. And he's like, dude, how do you do all of that? And one thing that our friend said, which really resonated with my husband, was they're all serving roles and serving positions. He was like, so it's easy to show up and just serve. I may be serving as a husband, serving as a father, serving as a pastor. So I think having some common denominator as your grounding space to let you know, it may feel chaotic, it may feel wild, and I'm wearing a lot of hats. But if all those hats have something in common, like serving, then it's I'm showing up and I'm serving. I'm not going to a new event, a different event. No, I'm showing up and being who I am, which is a server. So that really resonated with my husband. And another thing that my husband has been saying, which is one of my favorite biblical places in the Bible, is I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, Philippians 4:13. And so he has been using that as he's in this season of wearing all these different hats and showing up anyway. So that has been really helpful, which I think is guiding us into our last question about what are the rituals and practices or reminders that help us show up when we don't feel 100% ourselves. So I think that those would be helpful. And then the other part is that if we're going to compare ourselves to our good friend Jawan or to our good friend Kerri, that we're doing that still with grace for ourselves, because even though I can look at you and be like, dang, Kerri's doing it all, or we can look at Juwan and be like, dang, he's doing it all. Like, we don't know what's happening silently or quietly. I mean, clearly I'm your friend, so I know some things, but we don't know all the conversations you're having with yourself. And we have to be mindful of like using parts of that as inspiration, but not getting caught and thinking that we can do it the exact same way, because we're cut from different cloth, we're different people, and God has different callings on our lives and what he's called us to do. But to answer this question about additional practices and reminders is, for me and for what I teach my clients, is filling your cup to the point where you can give and you can show up from your overflow. So it doesn't feel like, oh no, I only have a drop left, and if I give it away, I'm not going to have anything. And then now we're showing up from a place of scarcity, and now we're showing up from a place of lack, which is a very different energy from showing up from like, oh, I'm well taken care of, I'm provided for, I've taken care of myself, and now I can give you a healthier version of me. So I think that that's really important. I mentioned earlier, music definitely helps to shift my energy for me. And I'm also very much a get it done person. So if it's on my calendar, I'm like, I want to get it done today, because if not, then it's just going to be on my calendar next week or the week after that. And it's like, we show up, we get it done today, and then now we can get to the next task or the next to do on the list.
I like the idea of a to-do list. I oftentimes, one of the things I'll do is put a calendar entry to do on my calendar. Your husband very wisely told me to use the list app.
Oh, yes.
On my iPhone. I have yet to figure it out. So I haven't quite gotten there yet, but I'm sticking with my calendar entry with to do. And I take great joy and pleasure in putting that check mark next to each thing.
Yeah, so rewarding.
Yes, it feels so good. And then you go back and you're like, oh shoot, I didn't do this other thing. So let me do that. One of my rituals, and I often do this in the morning before I go work out. And for me, it's counting and or a timer. And so, perfect example, just this morning, I every Friday morning, typically I'll do a run in my neighborhood. And, I'm not dreading the run, but who necessarily wants to get out of their warm, cozy bed to go do their run? And so I, as many people do, wake up, first thing I do, check email, check, do I have any new text messages from when I passed out at 8 o'clock the night before?
She's not lying about 8 o'clock.
I'm not lying. So, kind of check through my phone. And then sometimes I'll try to look on social media. I'm trying to get better at that. And so, then you're like, okay, let me say I'm going to be on my phone until, this morning, I think I'd give myself until 5:40 because I was up early. So I was like, at 5:40, that's my limit. So for me, having that rule, that time. And so I got up, I stretched, I got up, and then I went to go do my run. Sometimes it will just also be like, I'll say to myself, okay, I don't feel like doing this thing. I'm going to do a countdown from 10. And then I'm at that. When I get to 1, I'm doing it. Like, that's it. So for me, sometimes just the ritual of either setting a time, setting a timer, setting an alarm, or just doing a quick countdown to go, that is often very helpful for me to motivate me to go do the thing that I'm not necessarily naturally motivated to doing in that moment. The other thing that I'll sometimes do is try to remind myself, because there's not a ton of completely unique things that I'm doing in my life. Oftentimes things are repeated. And so I'll have to remind myself of what the circumstances were the last time I did this. So I have a particular work routine that sometimes I'm like, I do not feel like doing this. I don't want to do this. But then I'm like, you know what? Last time it went by so quickly. Or the last time it was so gratifying for someone to come and tell me this positive piece of feedback. Or probably most importantly, I'm so glad that I got this difficult feedback so that I could resolve this particular issue. So, for me, I try to either use that time or counting component or reflect back, when's the last time I did this particular thing I'm not super excited about, and use those previous experiences to move me through and to get me to the attitude, to that smile opening the door. I love that visual. I'm opening the door with a smile.
Your evidence.
Yes. So those are the things that I typically do.
I love that. Those are all good. And I love the timer, and I love the setting the time down, because it's you making a commitment to yourself. Like, And you already said you're a rule follower, you have discipline. So if you've set a rule that like, I'm going to do this for 10 minutes or I'm going to get out of the bed in 10 minutes, she's going to do it, versus some of us be like, okay, I said 10, let me get 5 more minutes. Let me get 2 more minutes. But I love the idea of setting a time so it gives you something else to commit to. The other thing that I would say, not necessarily a ritual, but maybe something to keep in mind when you're making a decision about how do I show up and give 100%? Do I show up anyway? Is reminding ourselves and remembering that our availability is not the same as our capacity. So we can look at our calendar and be like, oh man, I have 3 days this week and there's nothing on my calendar. And someone can call and say, hey, we need you for a full day, whatever it is. And you're like, I'm available, but do I have the mental, emotional, spiritual, physical capacity to commit to this thing? And sometimes we often mistake our capacity in our availability. We look at it as, oh, I'm available, I can do it. Whereas your body is like, nah, just have a seat and just relax and not do anything. And so I think that that's really important for us to remember. And then Kerri, you opened up with such a beautiful statement when you were talking about being a boss and how sometimes that requires us to do things that we don't necessarily want to do, which ultimately is part of the show up anyway hat. And so I think it's important for us to have litmus tests for ourselves to decide, where am I going to show up anyway? Where am I going to honor my rest? Where am I going to honor and give myself grace? Where am I going to cancel and reschedule? Because the truth is, in our boss seasons or in our boss era or being a boss bitch, there are times and things that like stuff that you don't want to do, but it has to get done. And so in those moments, we have to choose, if we have the availability and the capacity, to show up anyway.
Absolutely. That is all very true. I love the idea of a litmus test because it's consistent. It's something you can automatically default to. It's something you can write out and read every now and then. It's a mantra that you can have for yourself. So Hatters, we hope first of all, we would like to thank you for showing up for this episode. Hopefully it was not a task. Hopefully we didn't have to convince you to show up, but we are so glad that you consistently have shown up for us here at the Hats Podcast. And we hope that we've given you some insights and shared, quite honestly, moments we don't want to show up all the time either. And yet we find ways to do exactly that, to show up when we need to, or decide I'm not going to show up and this is how I'm going to handle not showing up in this particular moment. We hope that these tips and insights and stories that we've shared will be helpful to you when you face your next challenge of showing up anyway. As always, we want to say thank you so much for listening, and we tip our hats to you. The information in this podcast is provided for general informational purposes only and should not be construed as legal, medical, or therapeutic advice. Listening to this podcast does not take the place of developing an individual relationship with a therapist or attorney. If you need help for mental health or legal issues, we strongly encourage you to find a professional in your area who can help meet your individual needs.